Hello and welcome back. Now we've got to talk about Kirill Kaprizov. 7 straight multi-point games, 21 points in 10 games overall, the highest point per game average in the league. And I mentioned him in our second half breakdown video in the preseason. I was super bullish on him, and instead of drafting him, I went with Jack Hughes, and I will probably lose all of the leagues where I did that. So don't be an idiot like me, listen to the data. And in a week where Minnesota plays 4 times this week, you're going to want that exposure to Kaprizov. And we'll get into that in just a minute. But first, let's do what we always do and look at the Week 5 schedule. 47 games this week. We're back to the usual Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday light nights. You can see the best schedules here. Minnesota's got the best. Not only do they have 4 games, they've got 2 light nights and this back-to-back against San Jose, Anaheim, and they also have Chicago in there. So a nice, favorable schedule. Hopefully they don't take these games lightly and you can still rack up some offensive numbers from a lot of these guys. We'll get into this in just a second. You also have the Devils. They've got the Monday and the Sunday light nights. They've got a pretty reasonable schedule against Montreal, the Islanders who can't score, and San Jose. And then you've also got the Kings here with the front-loaded back-to-back, Nashville and Minnesota. Those are maybe not the toughest game in terms of Nashville's the way that they're playing now, but Minnesota is tough right now. They also have Vancouver and then the very scrappy Columbus Blue Jackets on the heavy Saturday. So a little bit less of a favorable schedule. We'll get into all of these ads as well. And last but not least, we have the Nashville Predators. I guess they are the least because look at this schedule. They've got the Kings, they've got the Caps who are red hot right now at 7-2. They've got the defending Cup champs who are also red hot, and they've got the pesky Utah Hockey Club who just made a move for Olli Mata, bringing in some defensive help, trying to save their goaltenders from being shelled as they have been. Ingram took a little bit of a dip there. As you can see down here, the worst schedules, you've got Vegas, Tampa Bay, Dallas, Rangers, Panthers, and Kraken, all with 2 games. With all of that said, Tampa Bay plays Tuesday, Thursday, and then they have a week off. They don't play until next Thursday. So keep that in mind if you've got any marginal Tampa Bay players to get rid of them after that Thursday night game. And then another note here, there are teams with 3 games and 2 light nights. You've got Chicago, Detroit, Edmonton, and Washington. Washington off to a really good start, 7-2, and they've knocked off some big teams like the Rangers, and they're playing pretty well offensively and defensively, as we'll get into in the goaltending section of this video. But let's start it out with the best schedule this week, and that is the Minnesota Wild. As we turn to the Minnesota Wild, the first thing to take note of is how dominant Kirill Kaprizov is. On the right, you can see this 3D graph of every player in the league right now. Celebrini's only got 1 game played, so that's why he's up there with 2 points in the 1 game. But Kaprizov way ahead of the pack. 21 points in 10 games, 3.1 shots per game, 2.1 points per game. So that's absolute incredible pace, and he's leading the way for not just the Minnesota Wild, but the entire NHL, leading the league in scoring, taking that over from Cale Makar. And that's been the number one thing to note of this Minnesota Wild team. They are Kaprizov dependent in that sense that they're getting a lot of their offense from that. But Matt Boldy, 12 points in 10 games on that line assignment. He's been playing really well. You also have Joel Eriksson X, 7 points in 8 games, 2.5 shots, 2.1 hits per game, but he's owned up. Same thing with Zuccarello, 11 points in 10 games, a nice 5 goals, 6 assists split. The only guy that you can potentially add off the waiver wire is Marco Rossi for forwards. 9 points in 10 games, shot volume a little bit low, but he has registered a point in 8 of his 10 games played, so relatively consistent in terms of getting him into your lineup and making sure he produces. In terms of defense, you've got Jacob Middleton, 8 points in 10 games. That's really high for a defenseman like this, but the 3.1 blocks per game is 4th in the entire NHL, so that's why you're owning him. 31 blocks on the season. That's incredible pace. As you can see, the hits, 1.5 hits per game. We'll get to that when we look at his hub. And then you also have Jonas Brodin, only 4% owned, 5 points in 10 games, all assists. The shot blocking is pretty good as well, 2.7 blocks, 2.1 shots per game. And then, so on top of all of that, a little bit of offense, and you're looking for mainly blocks out of Brodin. He is top pair with Jared Spurgeon, whereas Middleton is second pair with Brock Faber. It's just depending on what you consider the top pair, because either of those could be at this point. Now, as we take a look at Marco Rossi's hub, this is the forward ad for the week. You can see the assist numbers are pretty good, 87th percentile there, 73rd percentile in goals, but you're not getting a ton of shot volume. You're not getting any power play exposure. He's line 1 with Kaprizov and Zuccarello, but he's power play 2. So you do have to factor that in. No hits or blocks really to speak of, so not a lot in terms of peripheral coverage. You're just hoping that he keeps this pace up where he's got 8 points in his 10 games played. Now again, as we turn back to the D, Jacob Middleton, this is what it looks like on the hub. 97th percentile in blocks. Again, 4th in the NHL, 1.5 hits per game. So a hits and blocks D who's a little bit blocks heavy. The shot volume is not great at 1.5 shots per game, and he doesn't get power play time, so that will limit his ceiling. However, the offensive numbers have been really good. Now, I would expect these to come down in the next couple weeks as he kind of returns back to his mean. He's not really a point per game defenseman, and he's kind of in that range, 0.8 points per game. So I would expect a little bit of regression in terms of his offensive numbers, but the peripheral floor should be there for you if you want to grab him. Again, 32% owned. He should be there for you in a 12-team league. Now, as we take a look at Brodin, he's probably going to be your deep league target, mainly for peripherals. And this is what you're going to look at in terms of a favorable schedule 4-game week with off nights. Most of the time, you can't really plan out to get an offensive producer in that time of frame of reference or whatever. You're going to want to find a guy who's going to get you a peripheral floor and going to rack up those hits, blocks, or shots. That's where the volume plays come in, and this is what you can get out of Brodin, 95th percentile in terms of blocks and 85th percentile in terms of shots. So if you're in a points league that weighs blocks and shots a little bit heavier, this is where Brodin is going to shine, and at 4%, he should be there for you in most league sizes. Up next, we'll take a look at another team with 4 games and 2 light nights, and that is the New Jersey Devils. Now, first thing to note with them, Nico Hischier is on fire, 10 goals in 14 games, 15 points overall. You also have Jack Hughes, a little bit underwhelming, 12 points in 14 games, but 3.3 shots per game. You have Jesper Bratt, usual suspects, 2 goals, 11 assists, very assist heavy for him. Then you've got Timo Meier, not bad, 12 points in 14 games, 5 goals, 7 assists. And remember that stat line because he's got 2.9 shots and 2.1 hits per game. And Nason has the exact same stat line, but with 1.5 shots and 2.5 hits. So you're getting power play 1 exposure, basically the same numbers as Timo Meier, but at a lot lower ownership percentage. You also have Paul Cotter, 2.8 hits per game, 8 points on the season. Then you have Erik Haula here. We will go over these guys' player hubs in just a second. 8 points in 14 games, a little bit better shot volume, and 1.8 hits per game for Haula. So that's nice to see as well to elevate his peripheral floor. Now, as we move it along and try to find Paul Cotter, I'll twist this around here this way so you can see a little bit more. Here's Dawson Mercer. 7 points in 14 games, so half a point per game. Shot volume pretty low. He's dual eligible, which is nice. Center, right wing. All of these guys are multi-position eligible, which is nice. You can see Nason, Haula, and Cotter is their entire third line. So all of these guys are available with dual position eligibility. And then all with that said, you also have power play 1 exposure for Stefan Nason. So with his hub coming up here, we got 2.5 hits per game, 90th percentile. That's what you like to see there. But you also get this power play number, 86th percentile. He's got 4 power play points on the season. A couple of those are power play goals. He's the net front guy that they use on power play 1, and he's the only power play 1 exposure probably on a really good power play that you can find in the league at this level of ownership, 34%. Maybe Colorado factors in there because of their injuries. But in terms of guys that are sticking together and are healthy, Nason, for whatever reason, is unowned in a lot of leagues, and he should be because of this power play exposure plus the hits that you're getting. Shot volume is a little bit low for my taste, but the numbers have been there, 12 points in 14 games. Now, as we turn and take a look at Erik Haula, center left wing positional eligibility is nice, 15% ownership, so a little bit more ownable in a 12-team league. Even in a 14-team league, he might be there for you. 8 points in 14 games is a little bit underwhelming, but you're getting decent hits coverage, 1.79 hits per game there, 2 shots per game. And then on top of all of that, you get some pretty decent numbers, and he is power play 2, along with Dawson Mercer. So both of these guys are going to get you second-line power play exposure with Luke Hughes, which might be nice to add. And then on top of that, you're getting pretty good shot volume and then hits totals. So a little bit better shot volume than some of these other guys. That's the main reason you go with Haula, and he does get you some shorthanded points every now and then as he does kill some penalties. But then if you're looking for that peripheral floor, and if you're looking specifically for hits, you've got Paul Cotter. He was red hot to start the season. He's cooled off just a little bit offensively, which was to be expected, but 2.79 hits per game is what you would own him for. The goal numbers have been good as well. 6 goals, 8 points in 14 games. So mainly a hits and goal scoring kind of guy, maybe your Tom Wilson archetype. There are a couple of guys in the league, Will Cooley, another one of those guys that you can pick up. That's that Tom Wilson type that's going to get you hits maybe shot volume, and then some goals. But this is what Paul Cotter has been all season long. The offense has dried up just a little bit, but it's always there for the taking. Obviously, this line assignment, he was first line when he was lighting it up in the beginning part of the season, week 1. Now he's back on the third line, and he doesn't have power play exposure. So if you want that power play exposure, you do also have Dawson Mercer. Don't pay any attention to this blocks number. This is positional percentiles. Normally 0.93 blocks is not that really high in terms of guys that you would want to add off the waiver wire for that purpose. You have a little bit lower shot volume as well, 1.5 shots per game. This is why I don't usually go to Dawson Mercer. You're not getting a lot of power play numbers despite this exposure. Then you're not getting a lot of hits or blocks as a peripheral floor. You're also not getting shots. So basically you're just getting center right wing dual position eligibility and a little bit of power play exposure. He did have a nice week last week. So if in the last 7 days, Nason, 2 goals, 1 assist, 2 power play points, and a power play goal in there. Haula, 1 goal, 10 shots, 4 hits. You had Cotter at 1 goal and 8 hits. And then you had Mercer, the leading scorer of this bunch, with 1 goal and 3 assists, 4 points, and 6 shots. So if you picked him up last week, that probably paid off pretty well for you, although they only had the 2-game week this week. So this is the last 7 days. That includes a little bit of last week as I'm recording this on Saturday. Just want to make one more note here. If you're just looking for hits and blocks out of a defenseman, the main guy that you can find on the waiver wire is Brendan Dillon for hits and blocks purposes. He's 23% owned. So just another option for you out there if that's what you're looking for. Up next, we'll take a look at another team with 4 games. They've got the Monday, Tuesday back-to-back, and that is the LA Kings. Now, looking at this graph over here, you can see Kopitar at the top in terms of point per game average, 12 points in 11 games. The shot volume at 1 shot per game is really low, though, so maybe think about that as you're trying to add him. But Brandt Clark is the story this week. 1 goal, 10 assists, a point per game defenseman with 1.7 blocks. Shot volume a little bit low, but we'll get into that with his hub. Laferriere, 9 points in 11 games, 2.4 shots, 1.9 hits per game is really nice to see, and we'll look at his hub as he's 22% owned. Akil Thomas is down here. He has a small sample size, but 1 point in 2 games. That's why he's out front in terms of completeness with the 3.5 shots and 1.5 hits per game. As we turn this around, Tanner Jeannot is your hits guy this week. 3.5 hits per game for a forward. That's why he's 12% owned, 39 hits in 11 games. You also have Warren Fogle. He's 2% owned, dual position, 5 points in 11 games, and we'll get into his hub as well as we move forward. And a couple of the usual suspects that I would have gone to. Quentin Byfield, 39% owned, but only 5 points, 1.8 shots, no peripherals to speak of, demoted to the third line. And Phil Deneau, only 3 points in 11 games, though he is hitting a little bit. The shot volume is really low for what he can provide. Trevor Moore also there, but he's underwhelming at the moment as well, with hardly any goals in his last 10 games, and the shot volume is not great either. Now, as we do turn to these guys' player hubs, the first guy we'll look at is Laferriere. He is getting the Power Play 1 usage, so that is one of the reasons why you would go and add him, 22% ownership. Goal per game average, 92nd percentile, 6 goals in 11 games. And then on top of that, you're getting hits, 1.9 hits per game, 81st percentile there. And then shots is not bad either, 2.36 shots per game. So this is kind of similar to that Tom Wilson theme, hits, shots, and goals. And he's getting the Power Play 1 usage again. Single position is a little bit disappointing just because he could play multiple positions, and that would definitely help his ownership. But 22%, not bad for a guy who's getting you PP1 exposure. Now, we'll also take a look at Warren Fogle for you deep league players out there. Similar to Tom Wilson, except for the hits are not there. But the shot volume is pretty good at 2.55 shots. And the goals, not that bad either, 4 goals in 11 games. But worth noting that all 5 points that he scored this year came in the last 5 games. So he is heating up right now, which is good to see. He came over in the offseason, so now he's finally acclimated, and this might be the time to scoop him up if you're in a deep league. He is dual position eligible as well. Now, we're not going to look at Tanner Jeannot because you know what you're going to get. It's the hits volume. But what we will look at is this week's player to add, Brandt Clark, if he's available. He is 56% owned, so he's probably not there anymore. But a point per game defenseman, very assist heavy. Shot volume a little bit low, but just a shade under 2 shots per game. Power play numbers are really good. He's the Power Play 1 quarterback. And these two guys are guys that you can get off Power Play 1. If you're in a 10-team league, you may be able to get Clark. If you're in a 12-team league, you can probably get Laferriere. But these are the guys you're going to want in terms of exposure to that power play. And then on top of that, you're getting 1.73 blocks per game from Clark as well. So really good peripherals there in terms of blocks. Not something that you would expect from a younger player, but he is adding that into his file, which is nice to see. And then just wanted to take another look here at Joel Edmondson because of this number. So this is percentile by defenseman. 3 goals on the season is really good for a guy who's not known for that. 5 points on the year as well. And then you're normally getting him for hits and blocks coverage, which has been a shade lower than what he can do. So you do have some upside there at 1.67 hits, 1.78 blocks per game, and 1.56 shots per game. So all pretty decent in terms of a peripheral floor. Plus you're getting a little bit of exposure to Brandt Clark as they are paired together on the second unit. So just wanted to add him in there. One other guy I wanted to mention is Alex Turcotte, 0% owned, but he's on the top line right now with Kopitar and Kempe, and he is power play 2. So not much production to speak of. Didn't want to mention him in terms of a player hub because there's not much there, but he is getting that line assignment, 0% ownership. So I did want to throw that in there as well. And our last team with 4 games this week, though they do have a difficult schedule and they have been back to struggling, is the Nashville Predators. So one thing to note when we're looking at their graph here, Forsberg is still leading the way, 9 points in 10 games, but 4.6 shots, 2.7 hits per game. So really getting it done with the peripherals despite the lack of production overall over a point per game. You got Ryan O'Reilly at 8 points in 10 games. He's probably your best ad despite a little bit low shot volume. He's 53% owned. As we look at some of their guys, Yossi, a lot of people have been asking what to do with him. 5 points in 10 games, no goals, but 4.5 shots per game. So he's still shooting. They will come. Marchessault also shooting 3.5 shots, 1.9 blocks or hits per game. Stamkos also shooting 3.2 shots per game. So these guys will start to score as the numbers start to adjust based on where they're getting their chances. Gus Nyquist, 5 points in 10 games, all 5 of those points coming in the last 6 games, so that's why he's being featured here, 20% ownership. Luke Evangelista, 5 points in 10, he's 2% owned, so he's more available despite the same production basically as Nyquist. Nyquist on the second line, Evangelista on the third. Here you've got Jeremy Lauzon, 5.4 hits per game, second in the league behind Kiefer Sherwood. And then you also have Luke Schenn for hits as well, 3.1 hits, 1.6 blocks per game. So a lot to take in right there, but we will get to their player hubs. And as we move it forward, we're going to look at Nyquist first. Not a whole lot here on his hub, and this is a forward percentile in terms of blocks, so it's not crazy in terms of hits or blocks or power play points or shot volume. So not a lot coming for Gus Nyquist. What he did well last year was play well with Forsberg and O'Reilly. They've split that line up. Now he's line 2 with Steven Stamkos and Colton Sissons, who's at the bottom here. So that is a new line as they're trying to switch things up and find some offense. But he is relatively hot with 5 points in his last 6, so that's why he's being featured here. Now, as we take a look at the best ad this week offensively, it's going to be Ryan O'Reilly. His ownership is a little bit higher, obviously, so you're not going to find him in a 12-team league. Probably could find him in a 10-teamer, and with that production, it is a little bit lower than some of the other guys you can find. However, line 1 and power play 1, those are pretty much cemented for O'Reilly, and he's just a little bit below a point per game at 0.8. He is getting some blocks along the way, just a shade under 2 shots per game, and he does get some power play points as well. So that power play exposure is the number one reason to grab him, and you're getting exposure to Philip Forsberg, who should be their offensive powerhouse. And then we also have Colton Sissons here. He hasn't done anything this year. 1.7 hits per game is okay, but last year he was a reasonably good goal scorer in stretches. So he hasn't done anything, no points on the year, I don't believe. And this would be a time where you're buying low on a guy. If you're in a really deep league, he's second line with Stamkos and Nyquist. So getting good line assignments in terms of his wingers, and then hopefully you can make the most of this. I also believe he is power play 2. I could be wrong about that. But he's a guy who can score goals and give you a nice peripheral floor. He just hasn't found the back of the net yet. Now, in terms of volume with a 4-game week, one of the guys you're going to want to grab, if you can, is Jeremy Lauzon, second in the NHL in hits per game at 5.4, 100th percentile here for defenseman. He is the leading defenseman in terms of hits per game. You also get 1.3 blocks per game from him. Absolutely no offensive production. So he is a 1 or 2 tool player here for just hits and blocks coverage. I own him in my categories league specifically to boost that category. If you want a little bit more of an even split, you can go Luke Schenn. He does have a goal. He does have a little bit better shot volume, marginally at best, but the hits are a little bit lower. So more than 2 hits per game less than Lazon. However, you're also getting 1.6 blocks, so you're still getting a pretty good hits and blocks D. These are really good numbers, 99th percentile and 60th percentile respectively. So these are really good numbers for a guy who's 3% owned compared to Lazon's 27% owned. So both of these guys should be picked up for hits and blocks coverage this week in a 4-game week. They're going to get you the volume. You don't really have to care about them putting up points. They're just going to get it done for you in the categories that matter most. Up next, we're going to take a look at the best of the rest. And there's a couple more players than what you see on the left, so we'll go over those really quickly right now. So first up, you've got Mikael Granlund. He's at 58%, so probably not there. Center right wing, 13 points in 12 games, 3.4 shots, 1.1 hits, the most complete player on this board. You also want completeness. You've got Blake Coleman. He's at 40%, center right wing, dual eligible, 2.8 shots, 2.7 hits, and 1.1 blocks per game. So those are the most complete guys on this list. You also have Anton Lundell, who was filling in for Barkov in his absence, and he did really well there. 13 points in 12 games, 2.5 shots, 1.1 hits per game. But obviously Barkov is back, and he's playing really well. Casey Middlestat has to be on your radar. Middlestat only 47% owned, despite being one of the only guys still left on that top power play unit. They've had to fill in a lot of guys. They're missing a ton of their top 9 right now. He's got 13 points in 11 games. 1.2 points per game is nice to see from him. And then you also have a couple of the other guys. Niederreiter is the only other guy not on this list. 2.5 shots, 2.0 hits per game, 9 points in 11 games. He is 42% owned, dual position left wing, right wing. Now, as we look at the guys who you can add for this week in terms of the lower ownership guys, Pavel Dorofeyev is probably your best bet in terms of what you can find on the waiver wire. He is all the way back here, 9 points in 11 games, 6 goals. He's been really productive, 2.9 shots per game as well. And as I turn and take a look at his notes, all 9 of those points coming in the last 9 games, along with 3 power play points, because he's giving you that top power play line assignment. So at 14% ownership, single position is not great, but everything else is. He should definitely be on your radar. You also have Sean Monahan. So as I twist it around over here, you can see Monahan leading the way for the Columbus Blue Jackets, who are surprising off the bat. Dean Evison has them playing really good hockey. 10 points in 10 games, 6 goals, 4 assists, 3.4 shots per game. He's giving you top line and top power play exposure as well. Really complete, 71.1 on the completeness rating. So he is another really good ad for you, 28% owned, but single position center. So if you're looking for a guy who's dual position eligible and a little bit better in terms of point per game average, but a little bit less complete. So as I turn it here, completeness rating is on this axis, so he's a little bit further back, not as complete. But Connor McMichael, 10 points in 9 games, 5 goals, 5 assists, 3 shots per game. He's giving you line to line exposure. And then he's got 8 points in his last 6 games. So power play 1, line 2, well over a point per game, or just a shade over a point per game at this point. So he is one of your better ads, and he's dual position eligible, center left wing, 26% owned. So he should be there for you in a 12-team league, depending on how astute some of your other owners are. Now, if you're looking for a little bit more of a complete player, Fabian Zetterlund is another option. There's a bunch of guys you can find. Alex Wenberg is on this as well. We'll get into him in a second. But Zetterlund is going to give you that shot volume, 2.3 shots, 2.4 hits per game. His shot volume can go higher than that. It has been higher historically. 8 points in 12 games is nice, and his completeness rating 71.1 as well. So he's another option for you if you're looking for kind of a category coverage play. In terms of your forwards, he is dual position eligible at 19% ownership. And then we also have to talk about Matthew Knies. So Knies, 38% owned, a little bit higher ownership, single position left winger, which is not as favorable, but the 7 points in 11 games is nice, and 6 of those have come in the last 7 games, along with 5 goals and 19 hits. So he's 2.4 hits per game, 2.5 shots per game. His line 1 and power play 1 exposure is really nice, especially on a team like Toronto that should be scoring quite a bit per game. Maybe not the best start that they're looking for in terms of their record overall, but Matthew Knies should be available for you in a 12-team league. May not be there in every 12-team league, but in a 10-teamer, he should be there as well. And then I also did mention Wenberg. I don't think he's made it onto this, but just wanted to bring him up really quickly. He's been on fire, 6 points in his last 7 games, 2 goals, 4 assists, and he is 2% owned. So if you're looking for a deeper ad, there's a guy you can go to. Now, these are just the forwards. We could get into some D, but I already gave you a couple of category coverage guys, and I gave you Brant Clark, who is arguably your best power play quarterback guy this week. So we're going to skip that for this week. And now we'll skip over to the goaltending section. For the goaltending, we do have to take a quick shout out at Lucas Dostal. He's been incredible, 63% owned, so he's probably not there for you, but 945 save percentage on a team which is 4th percentile in expected goals against per game. They are terrible defensively. He's getting shelled, 13.64 goals saved above expected, 99th percentile in that and in total save volume. He's got a shutout to boot, and he's 97th percentile in terms of save percentage and 94.5 in goals against. So he's been incredible for the Ducks. And if you picked him up a couple weeks ago, this has been paying off really well for you. Kevin Lankinen, I got questions about last week. He is on this board. He was previously number 4. Now he's down to number 8. The only problem is there's a data error. He wasn't in the previous data set, so I don't have his hub here. But he is 60% owned, and the Canucks are number 5 in terms of team defense, expected goals against per game. So you can get some safety there in terms of finding a good defensive team and pick him up if he's available in a 10-teamer, but he's probably not. So with that said, we're going to deselect Lankinen. We're going to bring it up to a guy who had a really good week on a team that is really overperforming right now, and that is Elvis Merzlikins. He has moments where he's been really good. So you can see here back in 2022, he was really good, and then it dropped off a cliff in 2023 and didn't pick up that much last year. But this week, he's 13% owned, as I mentioned. This past week, 2 wins, a 2.34 goals against, 931 save percentage, and a shutout. He almost had back-to-back shutouts. So really good performance over the last week, and Columbus is not that bad. 55th percentile in terms of Team D, just a shade below expected in terms of this metric here. He does have that shutout. 907 save percentage is not bad. 2 wins in 5 games, could be a little bit better. But with that said, he's 13% owned, so he should be available for you on the waiver wire. Another guy I want to touch on, we have Justus Annunen, who I've mentioned in the past. He's pretty much taken over the number 1 job right now. Georgiev, if I scroll all the way down here, you can see him right here. He is atrocious at a 28. So his team defense is the only thing keeping him from the bottom. Jari's in the minors, Husso's in the minors. Reimer was claimed off waivers. So he's basically that caliber of player. So if you want their starter, now that's the question. Do you want their starter? Because they are banged up. They have had a bunch of guys out, and they haven't been the best defensive team, but they have gotten better recently. So 72nd percentile in terms of expected goals against. That actual goals against number is terrible because of Georgiev. But with that said, Annunen, 905 save percentage could be a little bit better. But with all of that said, he's been a lot more stable than a guy like Georgiev, and he is 45% owned still. So you may be able to go out and grab him in a 10-team league, and I definitely would advise you do that, especially if they have a good week. This week, I believe they have 3 games. He should see at least 2 of those, if not all 3. So 4 wins in 6 games is nice as well. Now, just below him at number 13, we've got Sam Ersson, who has picked up his play. He's at 21% ownership. Over the past 3 games, 2.0 goals against, 917 save percentage, and a shutout. He just came in relief, I believe, today and did not give up a goal, 8 saves on 8 shots. Their team defense has not been that bad. So 80th percentile in terms of expected goals against per game. He's below expected in terms of goals saved above expected. 897 save percentage is probably why. But if this trend continues, this would be a nice buy low opportunity on a starting goaltender in Philadelphia. Philly got off to a terrible start. They're starting to pick it up now. And 4 wins in 8 games is not bad for what should be their starter. They cannot rely on Fedotov at all, so he should be their number 1 guy going forward. Now, another guy I wanted to talk about, this is more of a backup conversation, not a starter, but anytime you see Eric Comrie in, you're going to want to go out and grab him off the waiver wire. The team defense is 2nd in terms of expected goals against per game, 96th percentile there. He is right about at expected, so that's fine. 914 save percentage, 2.7 goals against, and 3 wins in 3 appearances. That's what you like to see. Obviously, Winnipeg is off to a crazy hot start, so you're going to want exposure to whoever they've got in net, and you're not going to be able to get Hellebuck as he's the number 1 goalie off the board. So Comrie is available at 7% ownership, and that should be a stream option for you every single week that he is getting an opportunity to start. Now, another guy a little bit different. So we've got Dustin Wolf here in Calgary. He is pretty good so far, and they're using them basically every other game. So if you cannot go out and find Dustin Wolf, you may want to go out and pick up Dan Vladar. Vladar even playing a little bit better as he's number 15 on the board here, 1.5 above expected. Team defense is right about mid-pack right now, 909 save percentage, 2.7 goals against, 3 wins in 6 games. You could do a lot worse than that, and he's only 8% owned. So they're going 1 game for Wolf, 1 game for Vladar, pretty much an even split every other game. So you can kind of count on Vladar starting 2 games a week in a 4-game week, or at least 1 game in a 3-game week, which they have this week. So another guy that you can find off the waiver wire. I'm going to have to scroll down for this one, which is not necessarily the best sign. But one thing I wanted to point out for Marc-Andre Fleury, this team defense. So 3rd in the NHL in expected goals against per game, 2.62 there. He is a little bit below expected. The numbers don't look great in terms of the raw numbers. However, in the last 2 games, so he's played 3 games in total, started 3 games. In the last 2, he's got 2 wins, 2.5 goals against, and a 909 save percentage. So you're getting excellent team defense exposure. Minnesota off to another really good start, along with Winnipeg. That Central Division is very difficult right now, and you're getting the backup. I would definitely consider Gustafsson as the number 1 and Fleury as the backup, but you're getting him at a premium, 18% ownership. And this week they have the back-to-back Thursday against San Jose and Friday against Anaheim. So he will get one of those starts. So this would be a nice opportunity to go pick him up on a night or a weekday back-to-back that could be favorable in terms of the matchup. San Jose and Anaheim, they can score, but they're not necessarily going to rack up the wins. So this could be an opportunity for Minnesota if they don't take them lightly. And you can go out and grab Fleury off the waiver wire. And then one last conversation I wanted to have, and that is about the number 1 team in terms of expected goals against per game. You've got Logan Thompson here, 4 wins in 4 games. So if you're in a league where you want those wins, this is a guy that is playing marginally better than Lindgren just based on the wins, but the save percentage, 876, is not great. He is below expected there, 3.2 goals against. So in a categories league, this may not be as favorable. If we compare that with Lindgren, now Thompson is 54% owned, Lindgren 37% owned. Same team defense, 882 save percentage, not much better. Goals against is a little bit better. 3 wins in 5 games, so not that much worse than what you're getting out of Thompson, and the ownership is much more ownable in a 12-team league. He is a little bit below expected. So this is an interesting conversation because you have an excellent team defense that has goaltenders that are able to get wins, but they're giving up 3 goals or more pretty much every single game. So if the goaltenders can start to put it together and make some saves, this would be an ideal tandem to grab, or whoever starts to play better and get the starts, that would be the guy to go out and grab, and Lindgren is the more available option at 37% ownership. So a number of other guys we could talk about here. Why Swayman is down at 42. He's, Boston's looks terrible off the start of the year. Their team defense is terrible. He's below expected. This was a situation that could have been avoided in the offseason, but we'll save that conversation for another day. That's going to do it for this video. Hopefully you got something out of it. If you did, let me know in the comments section below, and let me know who you've got your eye on this week, because I am doing terribly in my leagues. I'm 10th in both the Creators League and my Money League, so I need all the help I can get. So please leave that in the comments section below. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.